Okay, so let's have a look at galaxies. Hopefully you can also discern your galaxy. Just like planets have to clear out debris in their orbit and finally pull minor moons and satellites around them to earn the right to be called a planet, so galaxies are colliding with others and in some cases even swallowing them up or merging with them. So the Milky Way is currently absorbing smaller Sagittarius dwarf elliptical galaxy. It's a Sagittarius arm. And it could be merged with a nearby Andromeda galaxy in the future, but that's quite a long way away. Collisions are much rarer today than they were in the past, but not impossible. And our own spiral galaxy, the Milky Way, is currently eating up several smaller satellite galaxies. Within 5 to 10 billion years, they say, some computer simulations show the Milky Way may collide with the Andromeda galaxy, and the end result would be more an elliptical galaxy, whereas at the moment we're a spiral arm type of galaxy. We've seen churches also merge through moving in the same circles and agreeing on important issues of faith, the centripetal forces. And the resulting church was different to the two original bodies, and that's quite interesting to see how the galaxies change when they merge with other churches. You can see this in business as well. And takeover strategies, hostile takeovers, mergers. Something new happens as a result of the merger often. So your position in a galaxy, our position. Scientists say that our own galaxy is hundreds of billions of stars, and they've done the technological research and observations over the last 50 to 100 years. Astronomy has taken on a new form because there's a lot more digital technology available. So they've now been able to use computers to help count all these things. Sometimes we wonder, how can they say there's so many stars? It's an interesting fact based on decades of deep space observation, and there's such potential in the universe for the birth of new stellar systems in millions of galaxies. So the Milky Way is a spiral shape, and we are situated in one of its partial arms called the Orion Spur. Now, that's not a restaurant in South Africa. I know South Africans like Spur. The Orion Spur is actually a part of a spiral arm between the Sagittarius and Perseus arms of our Milky Way galaxy. So the galaxy's two major arms are called Scutum Centaurus and Perseus, and can be seen as attached to a thick central bar of stars. There are two minor arms called Norma and Sagittarius. They're less distinct and can be located between the two major arms. So the highest density of old and young stars is in the major arms, and the minor arms are filled with gas and star-forming activity. Organizations have different spiral arms of operations and even spurs that emerge from there, sustaining the life of that organizations. Churches that have stood up for a truth and have faced persecution and tribulation go through a series of explosions and eventually settle into a rotating mass of stars and planets that group together with a common mission and purpose. The people we relate to as affiliated ministries in Harvest International Ministries, we agree on tenets of our faith, statement of faith, tenets of faith, and certain operational principles based on the early church, Book of Acts type of operational principles and accountability. And we obviously center on the doctrine of the New Testament doctrine of Jesus Christ, building his church, So if we can agree on those basic things, we can work together. If there's disagreement on basic issues of the foundations of our faith, we'll struggle to collaborate on conferencing, Bible training, missions, business, everything. So I look for that, and that's how we relate to people around the world. And currently we have Bible training centers affiliated to us all over Africa and in Asia, along with churches that have been planted and some that have just come into and merge with our galaxy. It's been quite fun to see this work out. I wrote this book quite a long time ago, and now over the last 20 years, we've seen how these principles have actually worked. And I should maybe write another book to explain how it works practically from experience. and not just theoretically. So now we can back up a lot of these things, and we've actually seen it all play out. So it's good that I'm actually doing these videos now, because I've networked with people for so long, and I've seen how their orbits have formed, how galaxies have merged, how some galaxies have flung out into the darkness, people that have fallen away from doctrine. And what happened as a result is quite scary. It's like the expanse of space. So there's a difference between seeing yourself as the center of the universe or seeing the big picture. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but you're not the center of the universe. And the quicker we realize that, the better. You might have your own system, but you're not the center. And that's kind of important to understand. Early astronomers viewed the universe from the perspective that the sun, moon, and stars revolved around the earth. They could not figure out the wanderers, the stars or planets actually, that changed their position seemingly randomly. Planets revolving around the sun are the clear explanation, thus changing their perspective with regards to the earth, but maintaining a fixed orbit around the sun. We are orbiting through the Milky Way, and the Milky Way itself is also moving. So keeping track of all the movement needs perspective, right? Spiritually speaking, churches tend to see the kingdom of God from their perspective only from their church or their ministry or their mission, but without realizing that the magnitude of God's expansive church. We're fulfilling a small part in taking responsibility for the regions and people God has entrusted in our care. Every so often, God will also allow galaxies to collide and merge to form unified movements that establish His kingdom in hearts and minds. So the Hubble Space Telescope is something to look up. You can Google it. Hubble Space Telescope, Hubble. And the astronomers found a cluster of galaxies colliding in 1999. 81 galaxies collided, and then 13 of them are remnants of recent collisions. And this finding was interesting because it showed that in some cases, big, massive galaxies are formed through collision between smaller ones, and sometimes the very confrontations we experience in life lead to the formation of long-lasting relationships. Because if we're not pulled out of an old way of thinking, we might never change. Okay. So do galaxies actually collide? That's actually probably a misnomer, because there's so much space in space. That's why I call it space. Let that sink in a little bit. So although during the collision, the stars and the galaxies do not run into each other, their orbits are strongly disturbed by huge tidal forces caused by gravitational pull. What one needs to bear in mind is the enormous amount of space in galaxies. So the gravity of the stars will affect that of each other's orbits. As a result, the parent galaxies lose their shape and smaller galaxies are formed. Clearly defined spiral galaxies, for instance, produce large, featureless, elliptical galaxies. The whole merging process can take less than 1 billion years, a relatively short time and scale in astronomy. The process of change takes time, therefore patience. The Bible says we should let patience have its perfect work in us, so that we will be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. James 1 verse 4. So a gallery of Hubble Space Telescope images shows us distant galaxies in various stages of collision. The merging galaxies sometimes have weird, distorted shapes, unlike normal spiral elliptical galaxies, and some show streams of stars apparently being pulled from one galaxy into another. So all of the galactic pairs are located in larger grouping of galaxies, and they can show you that online. You can have a look at some of those examples where there are galactic pairs busy merging. Two galaxies interact because of a tidal pull of gravity that causes the massive objects to attract. Remember the first principle of gravitational attraction. So stars within galaxies are so far apart that they also act individually, and an intricate sequence of tidal forces affects the future shape of the merged galaxy as it calms down. In the outer reaches of the collision, long streamers of gas and dust known as tidal tails stretch out and sweep back to warp and wrap around the galactic core. So gas and dust within the colliding galaxies are buffeted and accelerated by tidal forces, sending shockwaves through the matter. We had a ripple effect conference once, And we thought about the ripples that had gone out from our lives and have now come back. The effect of things coming back to you. So shock waves and things like that. Think about that just for a second. In galactic terms, the shock waves through the matter become so heated that it radiates light at a luminosity several thousand billion times brighter than the sun. Can you think about that? So when mergers happen, there's an explosion, but that also creates light and sheds a new light on the matter and what you're busy discussing and what you're merging on. So it's sometimes good to have a merge with people and discuss mergers, because it sheds new light on your core forces. It shows things that you haven't seen before. It might expose things that need exposing. So it's all good. And whether you merge or not is not really the point. The point is that you interact. So I don't connect with everybody, but I do interact with as many people as I'm allowed to, because that I grow in my understanding, I grow in wisdom, I grow in experience. It propels me sometimes forward, and sometimes it warns me of what could go wrong. So mergers are important. We need to interact while we're in this place. So there's different types of galaxies. Where NASA has a website with interesting shapes and names. You can look up NASA and just type in the gallery of NASA. You can type in galaxies and so on, and they'll show you interesting things like the Sombrero Galaxy. That's kind of something. It looks like it's a sombrero. Sombrero obviously showing that it's a much more elliptical style galaxy, whereas our Milky Way is more a spiral type galaxy. Galaxies are different. So further reading and research is sure to reveal more especially under the following headings: the birth of a star. How does that happen? Globular clusters, supernova, black holes, their role in the galaxy. They say in the middle of the Milky Way is a black hole, but it's kind of a dormant black hole. It's not destroying the Milky Way, but there is something like that at the center of our galaxy. How interesting. So think of a few collisions you've had spiritually, whether it is with people or even with God, where God confronted you on an issue, or even with your enemy, the spiritual forces we wrestle with. What happened? What caused the collision? And then when the debris settled, how did you emerge from it? What was your new orbit or galaxy looking like? And look at the other questions there as well, and have a look at it and answer those questions as best as you can. And let's discuss it in our next session.